very glad to have Marty Kaszubowski with us, who is also a Civic alum, class of 2004. He's doing some very interesting work in innovation, in new technologies, and in trying to create an environment in Hampton Roads that will be more friendly and more nurturing of those kinds of businesses. And he is doing that right now as Director of Innovation Strategies for Kaufman and Knoll's Consulting. Feeling good?
Marty Kaszubowski is such an interesting person to work in the world of technology. Is a wonderful way of bridging the gap for those of us who might feel like that's a little bit of a foreign territory. He has some good news, I think, in terms of some opportunities. Also,
God, I hope so, because I'm terrified.
I know. The snow's coming on top of it all. But Marty has some very interesting thoughts and opportunities about how we become the kind of region that can weather these kinds of storms and grow ourselves into a different kind of scenario. Marty?
Thanks, yeah, seriously, are you guys terrified now? I mean, this is scary stuff. And let me start with some disclaimers. I'm not an economist. I'm not a professional economic developer. I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn last night, so but I have been doing this a little while. I've been around the community now for going on 30 years, and as Kathy said, I've sort of bridged that weird place where innovation and economic development and money and other sort of things kind of cross. So I've got a little bit of experience in doing this, and I also periodically get asked to go overseas and talk about similar sorts of things. So I'll try to weave some of that into my comments as well. I don't often try to talk in the abstract, so I'll try to weave some real, sort of personal anecdotes and mention some people from the region that are doing interesting things as we go along. So I really want to talk about three things. The first is, I think we may have fixed this one already, is we need a sense of urgency in order to do the change that we think we're going to have to do. And I'll go into some detail on that one. The other thing I want to point out is that we often talk about small businesses driving the economy, which is complete baloney. New companies drive the economy, so I want to drill into that just a little bit. And then you guys will remember the election of 1992 when then candidate Clinton was told it's the economy, stupid. Well, in our case, it's the ecosystem, stupid. So I want to talk about what an innovation ecosystem is and how we can promote that sort of thing. So, I grew up in Detroit. I'm not a native. Another 3 or 4 generations in the Kaszubowskis will be native Virginians. But I grew up in Detroit, and if ever there was a one-company town or a one-industry town, it's Detroit. So this kind of scares me because I've watched Detroit happen over the last 40 years. One of the things you do when you're in the kindergarten in Detroit is you go to the River Rouge plant, which is the largest at the time. It was the largest automotive plant in the world. It covered an entire 1 mile square block. And what's fascinating about it is on the front end comes steel and plastic and employees, and on the other end popped out high-valued automobiles that were sold all over the world and a middle-class lifestyle that we all sort of grew up with. That doesn't exist anymore. But for my entire lifetime, we've been listening to people just like this talk about Detroit as being under threat from the Japanese, from the Germans building really good cars, from the need to modernize our plants, from the need to streamline our operations, and so on and so forth. And every couple of years, like clockwork, little panels like this would happen, and we'd all say really, really scary things, and the politicians would all say the right words, and then they'd go back to business, and nothing would happen. Well, you know the story. In 2008, all those predictions finally came true, and GM went bankrupt, Chrysler went bankrupt, we had to bail them out at the risk of millions and millions of jobs. They didn't have the sense of urgency that they needed to have. What concerns me is that we're going to have this same discussion in 6 months, in a year, in 2 years, and some of these things will happen. And we will face some pretty serious economic decline without having put in place some of the thinking and some of the sense of urgency we need to get there. So that's item number 1. Item number 2, and it does get more optimistic here. Again, the phrase I use is that new is more important than big or small. We often talk about small companies that drive the economy. That's not really true. It's really new companies that drive the economy. Now, I was told long ago that there are 3 pillars of economic development. There's the attraction pillar, which is where you try to get companies to come to your region. There's the retention and expansion pillar, where you're trying to help the current companies do more with different emerging markets. There's also the grow your own strategy. And in the time I've been here, we've had a reasonably good function in attraction. We've had some efforts involved with retention and expansion, but we've really never had a grow your own strategy here. It really has never been anyone's job to facilitate that. Why is that important? Well, the Kauffman Foundation, which is sort of the leading think tank on this topic, said recently that it is clear that new and young companies and the entrepreneurs that create them are the engines of job creation and eventual economic recovery. That's pretty straightforward. New companies matter. The other thing that they pointed out was from 1980 to 2005, pretty sizable chunk of time, 1980 to 2005, nearly all net job creation in the United States occurred in firms less than 5 years old. Well, what does that tell us? Not that there's some hope if you start something new. But what it tells us is Lockheed's not going to save us. Boeing isn't going to save us. Those folks aren't going to save us. What's going to save us is starting our own new ventures, starting something new, creating new markets, tapping those markets that Craig just talked about in cyber, and unmanned systems, and all of those are important. We can't rely on other people to save us unless we're willing to generate that sense of urgency and create those new ventures that are going to create the jobs going forward. I need to point out too, we talk a lot about innovation in terms of technology, and that's largely true. But I always like to talk too about one of the great job creators of the last 20 years, and one of the great innovative companies that any of us have seen is Starbucks. How many of you stopped at Starbucks today? I did, yeah. I should have bought stock 20 years ago. Why are they so innovative? Well, they changed the way we think about coffee. They changed the way their supply chain worked and created an entire new sort of market. They also taught us how to say Frappuccino in public without any embarrassment or irony. A very innovative company. My point there is that, yeah, we think about innovation in terms of technologies and so on, but it's also new supply chains, new ways of thinking about markets. And there are things we can do here in Hampton Roads that might be related to that in terms of logistics and port and other things. Third thing I want to talk about, as I said, is it's the ecosystem stupid. And what I really mean when I say that is the environment that facilitates the start and growth of new ventures, the kind that I work with every day, really is a community. And it's a community that starts small and grows. And in the last year or so, we've seen a tremendous amount of growth in this community, which you probably read about in the papers, and I could talk about at great length, and I'll save some of that for the Q&A session. But what I want to mention is I have a 16-year-old daughter. She's beautiful, she's brilliant, she's wonderful. I blame her mother. She's taken an environmental science class this semester. So we were talking a little bit about environmental sciences, and she was reading to me what an ecosystem is, and I just thought I'd say it here. Definition of an ecosystem: in a functioning ecosystem, each of the participating species benefit from the presence of all of the other species. Why is that important in this context? Well, because if you're trying to grow a venture, you need to have all of the other pieces of the puzzle in place before you can be credible. And in the past, what we've done is we've often tried to fix one piece of the ecosystem and optimize it without trying to fix the other ones. And for example, for years we tried to get venture capital to come to the region. And they'd come and they'd look around, and what they tell us is, well, there are no deals here. Well, there are no deals here because there's no money, but there's no money because there are no deals here. And all that is because there is no management here. It's all because we don't have the capacity to commercialize our technology, and so on and so on and so on. It really is about the total system and working on the entire system and building the community around it as you go. And what I really mean by that is we have tremendous idea generators here at the university, up at NASA Langley, out at the Joint Forces Command, or what's left of it, and DMAS and so on. We're starting to see more and more entrepreneurs that are turning those ideas into ventures. We're starting to see some management come around and interact with those new ventures. We're starting to see mentors and people who are trying to start a new seed capital fund, which I'd love to tell you about sometime. In other words, we're trying to get all of the pieces of the ecosystem in place so that we can begin to grow these ventures. And let me, before I finish, let me say, I want to say a couple stories about some people that I've met recently. First one is a woman named Marla Shookman. You don't know Marla. She's 20 years old, 23 years old. I met her up at a conference in DC recently. If you go to her website, hiremarla.com, what you'll see is her soliciting all of the mayors around the country on why she should come and live in their city. She just got back from Tel Aviv. She's looking for a place to live. So she wrote down her list of requirements for why she should come to that city. She wants public transportation. She wants a great arts and the music community. She wants a good startup community where she can get some job and have a great time. She's looking for a husband. So she literally is asking mayors around the country to picture on the city. Well, I'm not the mayor of any place, but I did picture on Hampton Roads, and sure enough, she came down. And she's here this week, and she'll be here next week. I'm going to have her up on the 21st floor to look at the river. And we have a reasonable chance of landing Marla. You know, okay, it's not landing, you know, the next big company, but to the extent that a region like ours can be relevant to one person like Marla Shipman, that tells us that we're starting to build the community in a way that we can begin to grow these ventures that we were talking about. The other one I want to talk about is Josh Fisher. Josh is another young guy. He's got this funky little goatee beard. He speaks in a sort of a California-like accent. Says the word "like" every other time. But he's brilliant, and he really wants to make a difference. And he had a company up in D.C. somewhere, and his team was all over the place. And he wanted to kind of consolidate the team. So he was looking for a place where he could bring his company. Very similar to the Marla Shipman story. They got in their car. They drove to Philly, and they drove to Charlottesville. They drove all over the damn place. They finally got to Norfolk, down on Lower Granby Street, and they met a couple of guys. They had some beers with some local people. What they saw was some energy and some community and an ecosystem that was amenable to the way they think and the way they talk and the way they like to do business. So sure enough, they moved, and they're in a building down there. They got a whole floor. They're starting to generate a lot of business. They've got customers up and down the East Coast. They've got really, really bright people there. They're building a relationship with ODU to do some really cool stuff with internships. Again, the idea that we can be relevant to that kind of a company and that kind of a guy gives us some hope that we're not going to be Detroit. We can actually grow our own businesses here. We can become the kind of ecosystem that spits out those cool and fun companies. And more importantly, we can create the jobs that the Kauffman Foundation has told us mostly come from new companies. So, a couple things I want to just leave you with is, we should never let a good crisis go to waste. And I fear that we have let a lot of good crises go to waste here in Hampton Roads in the 30 years I've been living here. I watched it happen in Detroit, I watched it happen in Houston, I watched it happen in a lot of other places. I don't want it to happen here. So let's generate a little sense of urgency. Let's build our ecosystem. Let's find the next Marla Shipman and Josh Fisher and get them here, and they can teach us how to grow our economy.
All that sounds really terrific. What do you need out of a group like this to make that happen? What would be the thing that would be, because I have heard some really interesting things tonight. I'd like to know what would move that forward.
I didn't bring a list. One of the interesting things that I always think about when I talk to a civic group is the one thing that every company needs is a customer. And if you walk around Silicon Valley or Austin or Boston or any of the really sort of high growth areas, what you find is the major corporations in town will actively seek out local companies to work with. They'll run their network systems, they'll supply them with brilliant people, they'll supply them with new technologies, they'll supply them with what they supply. And they know going in that they're probably not going to get the best service or the best product because it is what it is. You're working with early stage companies. But they're willing to reach out to the local community to find those innovative companies and bring them in and let them try, let them learn, and be that first customer. And oddly enough, I was having this conversation with some Centera folks recently, encouraging them, Centera, to become a better customer for the local companies. Now, there's more to that you can say. There's also mentoring that's possible. Surely there's some funding available that would be nice. So there's a lot of things they can do. But being a customer is one of those things that's often overlooked amongst the kind of folks that's here.
So how does that?
My job is I work with a consortium of Lockheed, Northrop Grumman, SAIC, GE, the big companies. And trust me, they're as terrified as anybody. I mean, you just say the word sequestration in their company, and you can see the color go out of their face. So yeah, they're terrified too. The other thing I'll say is, this kind of begs the question. If I wander around Austin or Boston, in fact, I was talking to a guy from Austin just the other day, they don't care. They're not worried about sequestration. It's guys like us that are, right? Because our economy is so dependent on this. Part of the answer is to fast forward a few years when Valkyrie is selling their products to, FAA or Boeing or somewhere else, and we've begun to diversify our economy. I'm with the rest of the panel that it'd be crazy to do sequestration, take that big hit, but at some point we have to look ourselves in the mirror and think that we need to get away from this reliance on the military.